Hello and welcome to the May 26th, 2017 JupyterLab Jupyter Notebook developers meeting. I'll kick it off with a summary of what we've been working on in JupyterLab the past week. Trying to get ready for the beta release as soon as possible, and that included making new API changes now. There's a flurry of those this week, as well as design paths that Brian's working on to include breaking out the CSS in such a way that we now support theming. Here we have a working Electron app demo, at least the start of one, so that it loads the application on the page using some manual configurations to start. And Darian is pretty close to having a working implementation of the settings system. Right now using local storage in the browser, but follow on to that will be actually using files on disk to back that up, so it's persistent. Notably, the PRs that we think are enough to enable real-time collaboration are all merged. So it looks like Ian probably has enough now, where he won't need to touch many, if any, more APIs in order to enable that. So that's a positive outcome. And so we're just trying to polish up the last remaining issues open for beta, mostly cosmetic at this point, hopefully. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Good morning.
Yes.
All right. I'm just waking up still. So as I'm doing the cleanup or the UIUX review, I'm finding, so I have this other PR open where I started to create a standardized set of UI controls, button, drop-downs, etc. I'm finding myself spending a lot of time sort of micro tweaking all of the different buttons and drop-downs we have styled so far. And we have this styling namespace that does some of this, but still pretty painful. Our CSS is I mean, it covers certain cases well, but there's a lot of fine tweaks I'm having to do, and so I'm wondering if we want to go ahead and try to do the just a few of the UI controls for the beta, and if that's going to help the process to standardize that stuff quickly, or if it's going to help to not do it. I'm sort of on the fence. Originally, I was thinking let's definitely not do it for the beta, live with what we have. But that, hand styling a drop down is pretty painful and slows down the process quite a bit. So I don't know. I'm not. I was wanting to avoid doing that for the beta, but I'm after spending way too long doing that last night on one, I'm having second thoughts. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Specifically, drop-downs is a concern?
Yeah. No, I was doing the what do you call it? The restyling the toolbar stuff in the CSV viewer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using this wrap select that we have in the styling namespace, and that CSS was set up for slightly different usage cases. And I think part of what, like when we do the UI controls for real, we'll want to figure out sort of get carefully about what we want to style by default. Like, I mean, a great example is that Dropbox had a 12 pixel bottom margin, and I think it was set up for the ones in the what do you call it, cell tools, where you're wanting to space things vertically, and it's just a matter of basically thinking about what is the generic drop down, and then what are the variants. Like in the toolbars, we tend to have no borders on the drop downs, although in this particular case it's a delimiter drop down, and so the text in the drop down is really minimal, and it looked weird without a border. So I don't know. It's just a matter of sort of capturing the different cases we would want to handle, capturing size assumptions, and then I think part of it is I think the code base for things like a toolbar will be cleaned up dramatically if we make the toolbar itself one of these VDOM renderer objects that we can literally put all the logic in a single model and put all the logic in the rendering logic in a single render method, where it basically just calls factory functions that create VDOM nodes. I think that type of thing is going to be simplified greatly. But again, I'm trying to avoid not doing the API cleanup. I was more stumbling on just the visual design consistency questions, and I know there's still some button work that Cameron and I are doing in this last pass on everything. I don't know. I'm torn. We can wait on it more and see how it is. See how we're doing sometime next week at the dev meeting, and see if it's worth tackling that. And maybe if I run into situations where I need to clean that stuff up, I don't do it right now. So we may basically leave drop downs and buttons and text boxes as they are, and then make a call later. That sound like a good approach.
That sounds fair.
I think it's fine to wait until there's more people to comment on the shed's color than to endlessly debate the 5 versions of yourself.
No, I mean, I think we have a good sense now of what versions we need. It's just a matter of capturing that in a good, clean, programmatic way that makes sense. Okay. Other than that,
I think it makes sense to wait till next week too.
Okay, I will try not to dive into that much. So a few other things that I'm running into on the UIUX review. One is the FAQ and the about page. Both are out of date right now. So for those who haven't looked at it for a while, the FAQ is a bunch of text that basically answers questions about JupyterLab. The about page is more of a visual tour. Both haven't been updated in about a year, and my thought with the about page is that it's going to be, because it's all visual, it would be quite a bit of work to redo. And so my thought right now is to combine, basically to get rid of the existing about page and then update the FAQ so that it has the content in some appropriate form. So have the version there, have information about where people should file bugs, if they have questions, if they want to write an extension, where's our documentation, basically everything you need to know about it. Otherwise, I think we're going to have to do a full and time-consuming design pass on the About page, which I just don't think it's worth our time on that right now. I think we're better off spent on polishing the actual user interface for the different packages. So any thoughts on that?
I think the screencast or casts will partially address what the About page is doing now as far as discovering features.
Mm-hmm. And we can even link to those on the FAQ page. Yep. Okay, any other thoughts on that one? And then the other is the launcher landing experience. And so our long-term plan is to combine the launcher and landing experience so that there's some plus button that a user clicks that opens a panel in the dock panel that has the different activities. And then when a user clicks on an activity, that panel gets replaced by that actual activity. So if the user clicks on new notebook in that panel turns into that notebook. And so they can move the panel around to where they want the notebook to be. And so we have different pieces of this, but we're not wanting to do the full refactor for the beta. So we have an actual launcher API. The launcher currently, though, is in the side panel. We have the landing page that's more what people first see. And I'm wondering if we can do something that's a little closer to where we're going to end up. And the main question, so basically what I'm thinking about is temporarily, for now, removing the UI in the left panel of the existing launcher, and then having a flag in the open command of the landing page that will either display the JupyterLab banner or not. Basically, so it can be opened as a initial landing page or a launcher that just has the 4 activities, and then setting up some plus button somewhere that just opens that thing in the dock panel. It won't have the replacement behavior that we'll eventually want, but I think that will get us close to the right user experience and reduce the redundancy. And the main question is sort of, where would we put a plus button that opens the landing page minus the banner part of it? And it sort of, I mean, so one option is to just do a plus button up in the top of the file browser where our existing plus button is. We'd need to pull out the new folder button there because it's not something that lives in the dock panel. Or I was talking with Steve about, where else in the UI could we put such a plus button? And I think that plus button location would survive the refactor of the launcher and landing stuff. So I don't know, thoughts on that? If not, that's okay. I mean, I could talk to Cameron today, see if he has any ideas. Some of the options that Steve and I talked about, one would be something in the left side panel tab bar. Another thing we talked about would be somewhere in the dock panel itself, like floating in one of the corners of the dock panel. There, we're worried about it covering up actual content. We talked about to the right side of the main menu bar, but then in the Electron app, if that gets moved to native, that's weird. We could, in the file menu, put a new activity or just a new thing, a new item that opens this.
Yeah, I was just going to say file
new ...
Yep. So I think that
and then
I
have
think
a shortcut for it. Figure out what the shortcut should be and show it right there next to the menu bar or the menu item.
But I still think it happens often enough. It should not it shouldn't be. We should have something that's even more accessible than a main menu item.
I mean, the like when the thing that I create new of every day, the most of, are browser tabs and text files in Sublime Text. And in Sublime Text, there's a file new menu item, but I never use it. I always use the keyboard shortcuts. In Chrome, I'm probably 50-50 between using the plus button next to tabs and Control T for new tabs. But Chrome's a restricted UI where you've always got this tab bar. It's always visible. There's no single document mode. There's no other, like, it makes sense for them to have a plus thing there. You could have, if there's nothing in the doc panel, you could just have a big center, nicely styled plus button that just, hey, create a new thing in this empty area. And then once you have stuff in the doc panel, we could add maybe a plus icon as a custom tab bar thing so that you can create a new item in any of the tabbed areas. That doesn't really help us with single document mode, but at that point, maybe that's a special enough case that you can just menu items fine.
I think single document mode menu item is fine. The nice thing about having a plus bar or plus in each tab bar, even though it may be visually cluttering, I mean, you probably turn down the opacity or something, is it gives you the locality that you need. So if you have 4 different panels, it's very easy to create a new thing in a particular location. And it's pretty clear where that new thing should go, right? It'll go at the very end of that tab panel at that particular location.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I think this will, in general, I think you're going to need to do some styling work for the tab bar for this, not just for the button, but for the tab bar as a whole, because right now the tab bar itself is mostly invisible and only the tabs have color to them. But if you put a button there, it's probably going to end up, for various reasons, at the right edge of the tab bar, and so you'll probably want some sort of background color on the tab bars to distinguish the tab bar from the background of the dock panel. And the reason I say this is because, you know, when we're dragging, you can drag tabs around that fill up that whole tab bar content space. And if you look at the way, and so that makes it weird when you have this extra plus button there. And so if you actually look at the way that Chrome handles it, is that when you're dragging tabs around in Chrome tab bar, they actually hide that plus button.
Yeah.
Tab bar has intimate knowledge that plus button is there. And so in order for me to do the same thing in Phosphor, I would have to bake that concept of a plus button into Phosphor's tab bar, because the tab dragging logic would have to do something custom for that tab button. And I don't know that we want to push the logic, the knowledge of a plus button that far down into the stack. And so the alternative would be to offset not have that plus button in the same content node as the tabs. And so the most logical place for it at that point is to the right edge of the tab bar, at which point you need to offset it with background colors. So this is, as an aside, this is, if you remember the original way that I had styled the tabs and the tab bar in the examples that I put out, there was a background color for the tab bar that offset it from the rest of the content. That is why, because I was expecting we were going to have a plus button on the tab bar at some point.
I mean, the other option design-wise would be to do a more of a call-out action button that doesn't require a solid background, where the color is encoded in the button itself. That's a possibility. And then, I mean, we could even, do you think it makes sense to hide and show that button on a larger hover area? Like make a so many pixel wide div in the tab bar that has a smaller button, and then hover, display the button when you're hovering on that spot.
I generally hate delayed actions like that, where it's like I've got to go here and then wait for something else to happen and then move my mouse again. I don't like those types of interfaces. One thing that just popped into my mind, though, is that maybe instead of button, what about just a right-click menu on the tab bar? New item here. It's not as discoverable, but once people know about it, you've got less visual clutter.
Yeah, I mean it is the discoverability that, I mean one of the most common things users will do is, hey, how do I create something new? And I want that to be extremely obvious. And yeah, I mean like from a visual design perspective, the cleanest, most discoverable, and sort of simple way of doing this would be to do a circular material design call out action button in the lower right hand corner of the dock panel. Like that, no one would ever miss that, but it would obscure content. I mean, it's not like there's prices to pay for that simplicity and discoverability.
It's not clear which tab panel tab will go into. I mean, that's for a much more constrained user interface too.
Yeah, and somebody that's on a 30-inch monitor like me will never ever use it.
You probably never see it way over there in the corner.
So I don't know. It is a tough design problem. Now we could use the plus button that we have in the file browser for the beta. Like that might be an okay compromise.
And put create new directory as a right click, say, in the file browser.
I'd probably pull that out as a separate icon. Cameron already did the design of a nice new what do you call it? New folder button. A folder with a little overlaying plus on it.
I'm really hesitant to put terminal. Console's one thing, but terminal in there, because if you're launching a terminal from the file browser and it's not in that directory.
Yeah. Yep.
Wait, I thought you were doing a plus button in the file browser that would pull up this tab panel, and then you're interacting with the tab panel to create the terminal.
Yes, but
which is one step removed.
You're opening a terminal, from a certain provenance.
Yeah.
Another location would be like the call out action.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that could still be done. This launcher tab widget thing, whatever we decide, could take as an option the
working directory to
create new items. And so if you launch this thing from a file browser, then the file browser is going to, set that option to whatever its working current directory is. But maybe if you launch this tab from the menu bar, then it's going to use the server root as the directory.
Yeah, and I think that was our original idea about how to combine the launcher idea with the sort of the current working directory notion, is to rather than have the file browser expose a public current working directory for this purpose, basically have it like if it is the one that is triggering the launcher to open, have it just pass the current working directory into that launcher at that time.
Yeah, if you've got a command to open a new launcher, that command can take an argument, which is the path.
Yeah, exactly.
My point about the terminal, though, we have a technical limitation where we cannot open a terminal in a given location. That requires a server change.
No, and I think that's fine for now. And I don't. I mean, another way.
Not really a bug, but in terms of like that's something that we shouldn't make design decisions based on that technical limitation, because that limitation should be removed.
Yeah, and another way of thinking about this is, for example, on a Mac, there are applications are represented as files. And so to start an activity on a Mac, even one that knows nothing about the file system, I go to a particular folder and click on Spotify or something like that. And so there are places in other operating systems where non-document related things are still treated and started in the same way that document related things are. But like I think, yeah, it's a question of how do you trigger that stuff.
It's different launching from a specific place. I mean, you don't have a concept of a working directory that's that directory that you're in when you launch Spotify, et cetera.
Well, but I mean, there's absolutely differences. Okay.
So fodder for lots of discussion next week.
Yeah, exactly. We can keep. I'll talk to Cameron about it today. Something to think about.
Yeah, I guess it's fair to take the opinion that eventually Terminal will be able to launch the current working directory, but there will be other things that we'd like to launch that don't necessarily have a current working directory. I guess that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Certainly,
Yeah.
I can imagine any sort of like data service or whatever cloud, manager, whatever.
Yeah, but that's all fine. Like if the file browser gives a working directory to the launcher, but some item
You can ignore it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I like the idea that a plus button in each tab bar, a very subtle plus button, say, it breaks the dependence on the file manager. So it's conceptually your activities are more than just documents and files.
Yeah, I like that just because it's going to be familiar for everyone that uses the browser ever. It would be helpful in this case if, I don't know how much time Cameron has available, but if we can think about what we want that to be and kind of toss around the pros and cons of the various ways that we could make that with respect to whether I need to do stuff in Phosphor to support it. The sooner we can do that, the better.
Okay. Would folks be okay with that button only appearing when that panel is active? I'm just the only down. I mean, that approach has a lot of pros that I really like. It has the locality information. It's very accessible. I don't know. It's a model that people are used to from other applications. The only problem is if you have a lot of panels, there's just a lot of plus buttons to look at, and the more discoverable we make them, the more annoying it will be that there's many of them. That's my problem. And so some way to subdue, or I mean, maybe we I don't know. That's my only concern about that approach, even though I mean,
you could make. So I noticed that Chrome, for example, does not have a plus sign. It has a shape that's visually similar to the other tab shapes, and so it doesn't stand out nearly as much.
Yeah.
So there's other ways to make it more subtle. To me, I think it would be annoying if I'm trying to set up tabs in different tab panels to have to click on that tab panel to activate something in that tab panel before clicking a plus.
Well, that's very true, though, about the Chrome.
And if it's in the tab panel, we don't even necessarily need an icon on it.
Right.
Would just be a little.
What do you mean?
I'm just saying that there's enough of an expectation there of something at the end of my tab panel opens a new thing that doesn't necessarily have to have a plus sign.
Yeah.
Make that strip.
Yeah, I'm wondering if just a little tiny square, very, transparent, lines, so very subtle lining borders, just a little square in the corner.
That's essentially what Chrome has.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that might be just simple enough and do the job. Okay. Yeah, let me, I'm going to drive into campus here in a few minutes, and Cameron, I think, is working, and I can have him mock up some of this. But I think that's...
Is Cameron going to be there next week?
No, he's still got class.
I suppose we should support him going to class. Okay.
Yeah. And then one other question. Right now, the help extension can open iframes in the dock panel. I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to have an actual iframe extension where you can pass it a URL and it will open it. And the other thing I'm thinking of there is that would enable us to have a local file handler for HTML files that you're editing to open them in an iframe and render the HTML for like web development. Does that basically separating out that part of the help plugin and then having the help plugin and the HTML document handler, like an HTML viewer extension, both simply just call into an iframe extension?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. Cool.
And then, so there'd be a command that brings up a dialog where you paste the URL, basically.
Actually, I think the way I would do it is have the low-level iframe extension just pass the URL as an argument to the command, and then have other parts of the UI, either like the help system is going to already know the URLs,
Right.
the registry is going to already know the URLs, but if someone else needs to have you paste a URL, you can do that. So leave it up to other parts of the UI to offer things like that.
Yeah.
Right. Jason, want to cover anything on IPyWidgets?
Steady progress towards the beta. Of the things that we've merged this last week, let me see if there's anything that particularly. Yeah, I think it's just a bunch of cleanup stuff, a few tweaks here and there, concentrating on testing. Right now, the 3 PRs that are in progress are testing the widget base code and making it an output widget for the embedded widget manager, which would mean that that NB Convert or Jupyter Sphinx can render the interact commands, and as well as, let's see, the PR somebody's working on a Python-based code to generate an HTML page with widgets on it, which several people would love to see.
Nice.
Yep. So my guess is we'll release beta next week, clean up a few last things, and wait a week and then release final.
Cool.
Or at least RC.
So I also see that Grant is here. Grant, any updates on the classic notebook side?
Hey guys. So no, I don't have any updates on my end. I've just been caught up with some other things the past 2 weeks. So
okay.
I'm looking forward to getting back into it this coming week.
Yeah, you're there at the dev meeting.
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah, one thing we should discuss at the dev meeting and figure out is, now that the extension stuff has settled down, what's the best way for us to organize these other extensions that you've been maintaining? It even, I don't know that we want to do it, but it even occurred to me that now that the lab extensions are just NPM packages, managing them all together in like a in a single Lerna managed repo would help. But
that would really help me just managing them in the future. Yeah, I haven't had a dedicated a couple days to work on it, but I've been thinking about it. And yeah, you're right. Like the fact that JupyterLab is managing extensions differently now as NPM packages changes things, and it makes it much simpler to just manage JupyterLab extensions. But since the notebook still needs to be in a Python package form, yeah, it's just kind of like we got to make some design decisions, and we should try to make it as consistent and as simple as possible. Like those are the goals.
Yeah, so
it'll be good. It'll be good to see it in person, and especially with Steve, and just hash it out.
Yep. Yeah, I think we want to have those things easy to install when the beta comes out.
Definitely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, for me, there's still an open question of the shared JavaScript that was private. How to handle that in the MIME-render cookie cutter? Because if the MIME-render recipe starts with publish this NPM package that is sort of like a playground, that's probably going to scare people away immediately. Yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
It would involve a pretty major refactoring.
Yeah. And then there's also the other question of, are these ones that we're maintaining common enough, or are some subset of them common enough that we literally want to just bundle them in with Lab and Classic Notebook? That's something like that Kyle brought up, and that I think, again, especially something like the JSON MIME render, it's difficult to imagine people not wanting that installed.
But we should, if it is, we should find one simple extension that is not common enough, so people have some examples of simple extensions.
Yeah, exactly.
To look at. I mean, Widgets is a more complicated extension, for example.
So we got JSON, GeoJSON. We have this interactive table one, table schema. We have a Plotly one that's kind of like a toy render extension that we could totally point people to. But I agree with Brian. I think the JSON one should be bundled. It's just a better way to view the data. And GeoJSON seems like that's probably common enough as well.
I would keep the GeoJSON one out. I mean, it's so simple. Like, it only handles points in the GeoJSON file, etc. It's so simple that I think if we were going to bundle one, we should make it handle a lot more GeoJSON structures, so polygons and whatnot else. But as is, I think it's more of an example starting point for a mapping plugin.
I see. Okay, so are you saying that the leaflet library just out of the box doesn't support things like that?
Oh no, leaflet supports it great. That GeoJSON plugin was written in like 2 hours in a sleep-deprived state, and the only thing I wrote was handling points, because that's what we needed for our demo. So the extension itself could be much more complex to handle a lot more about GeoJSON files. Right now, it completely ignores a lot of stuff in the GeoJSON file.
I see.
So if we were going to bundle it, I think we should make it more complete.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But I think it's fine to say at this point it's a starter for a mapping plugin, and we encourage somebody to finish it, or we finish it ourselves or whatever. But it's not as complete as, say, a lot of the other ones where we've got a CSV viewer that handles tabs, etc. A JSON viewer, which is complete; it understands all JSON files.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can go over that stuff next week and sort it all out. That'll be great.
Yeah.
Quick question. So NPM 5.0 was released. That compared, I know that some people are looking at Yarn. Does NPM 5.0 do anything for us? Has anybody seen it? Okay.
No.
Okay. So just FYI, NPM 5.0 was released, and apparently some people are comparing it to Yarn. It's apparently sped up quite a bit.
I know the semantics of linking, I think, were supposed to be updated, but I still think it's not. It doesn't work with dedupe. I'd be surprised if it did.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, I'm stopping the recording. Thank you.